Welcome back to Saints Squad. I'm your host, Dylan Sanders of Saints Wire. Happy Memorial Day, and I am going to go ahead and say it. I don't think we've seen enough to decide the quarterback competition yet.
Oh, I'm Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On at Saints podcast. I also think we haven't seen enough, but I think we've got a pretty good idea who's in the lead.
John Hendricks, New Orleans Football. Enjoy your Memorial Day, and it's morphin' time.
This is former Saints wide receiver Lance Moore, and happy Memorial Day, Who Dat Nation.
It's the Saints Squad, sponsored by Game Time. Everything New Orleans Saints, every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from down in the Big Easy, the way only Locked On Podcast Network can. Get ready and squad up. It's the Saints Squad Show, starting now.
Howdy, United Nation. Welcome back to the Saints Squad, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making us your first listen every Monday and Thursday. We have a unique group of experts here ready to bring you a fun and informative show on everything New Orleans Saints. OTAs was last week, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be diving into stuff like what do we want to see from what do we want to see for the next couple of OTA sessions? Who all stood out for the first couple of days? What do we make of the offensive line so far? We're going to start off with the first impressions of the quarterbacks. First time seeing Tyler Shough in the NFL, in any kind of NFL setting. And then the first time seeing Spencer Rattler since the change over to the Kellen Moore era. And we have a couple of guys who were there for the first, got to see. So I'm going to start off with Ross. What do you think of the quarterback's first impressions?
Yeah, I think both made good first impressions. They just did it in slightly different ways. I'm curious to see if John agrees here. We both got our opportunity to see them on Thursday, but I felt like Spencer Rattler had the strongest overall day, while Tyler Shough had the biggest highlight, if that makes sense. That's kind of the way that I look at it for these two. So I think that Spencer Rattler kind of starts off kind of in this collectively strong place, while the flashes of Tyler Shough are still very, very exciting. So that's kind of the way that I look at this quarterback battle right now, after seeing it just one day, just during OTAs, no pads, no pass rush, all that kind of stuff. But seeing it from there, that's kind of the way that I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, I would say that we're not going to get hyped up over 8 throws. I mean, like, again, nobody's going to be deciding anybody as a starter over 8 OTAs throws, because there's no pressure packages, there's no contact really, stuff. But I did think Spencer Rattler handled himself extremely well. I thought Tyler Shough handled himself extremely well. So I feel like with Spencer Rattler, it was a good confidence builder, right? That's kind of where I feel is. And we've talked about on this show saying that, he's been there as part of the offseason program kind of since day one, right? And he's been working in the offseason tirelessly, right? And so I think we saw a lot of confidence come through for him. I thought he looked good. I loved seeing Tyler Shough having to kind of improvise a little bit, right? Throwing on the run, seeing Rashid Shaheed being able to do kind of his thing. That was really exciting to see, is just a missing element. I thought seeing Cedric Wilson Jr. getting involved a lot was kind of a little bit of a precursor. We talked about him and kind of his success at Dallas. But look, I think the biggest storyline, obviously, from OTAs was seeing Spencer Rattler's comfort level running with the first team, aside the offensive line, which we'll get into. But I thought he handled himself extremely well, very poised. And of course, you look at it, I think he's really confident. He's embracing this. He knows that, spotlight's on him. He's been in this situation with competition. We've kind of hinted that it's going to be on Tyler Shough to kind of take the job from him. And so I think Rattler, it's close, but I'd still say check mark goes to Rattler in this one.
Yeah, John, I have a bone to pick with you. You told me that Tyler Shough went 6 of 8, and then it started being reported that it was 7 of 8. So
I say 6 of 8 too. I say 6 of 8 too.
No, I'd say so, because one of them looked like it was broken up at the end. So that was what I was. I think that's the one that we're talking about, right, Ross? So I think it was
like right side of the field. It was like a slant close to the line of scrimmage. Ball carrier went to the ground, and it looked like the ball went to the ground with him, in my opinion.
Look, and here's the thing. Here's the thing: is everybody, all the aggregates and stuff, if you don't have context, don't necessarily go off of the final stat line. Like you're saying 6 of 8 or it's 8 of 8 or whatever. It could be all checkdowns, and I mean,
Right.
you could ask Lance. Nobody's getting excited about checkdowns for 8-8. But again, I think the thing is, you look at the route tree or wherever his completion percentage and where his completion distribution was. Rattler used a lot of the different sides of the field. I think Shough, aside that one big hookup to Shaheed, was mostly more in that short to intermediate range. But look, I think Rattler's placement on some of those throws was just perfect. Like, he had one that he threaded right in the middle where Denny Stutzman was and Jordan Howden. I mean, that was a perfect placement for Rattler. And so that's the type of stuff that I think people should be excited about. But look, we all see different things, and I'm not saying other people aren't locked in or anything, but we pay attention to all that stuff. And so I'd say
we are locked
maybe
on.
6 or 8.
That's fair. That's fair.
Locked on practice, but we're locked in practice.
And I will say that, like, 6 of 8, 7 of 8, Lakers are fine. Like, it's it's fine. You know what I mean? Like, it's all good. Like, it doesn't change the way that you should feel about this player if it was 6 versus if it was 7. And in fact, the ball was catchable either way. And I think that's part of that context that John's talking about. In fact, actually, I would say both of the incompletions were because of good defensive plays as opposed to the ball being put in the wrong place or anything like that. And so I think that's a really good thing. I think that what helped Spencer Rattler really stand out, though, was just his quick decision making. Got the ball out. You saw him move through the field one side or the other. You saw him take all these full field progressions and how quickly he was able to get through that, move on, get the ball out. Big part of the equation for him was being sacked 22 times in his games last season. And a big part of that was holding on to the football, young quarterback things that you would expect. These aren't surprising growth areas for Spencer Rattler. But you could see the experience really kind of stand out. And one of the things that I think every player and every person in any profession benefits from is knowing exactly where it is that they want to improve, what they want to get better at. I think you can see that growth from that determination in Spencer Rattler over the course of this offseason.
Yeah. Lance, what do you make of the first couple of days of reporting on the quarterback competition so far?
Well, I actually have a question for Ross and John. Like, you say that you guys were there and that, the part of practice that was open. How much of the practice did you guys get to see? Was it just that 7-on-7 period, or were you guys actually allowed to be there for the entire practice?
No, definitely not the entire practice. It was probably about an hour and a half maybe worth of, so we saw a lot of the drills, but they did 7s, that type of stuff, and get the edge rushers involved again. Like, that's going to be a norm for them when they run the 7s. And so other than that, it was just drills. That OTA, the 7s, that was the highlight. They did some walkthroughs with the full offense without helmets and stuff. So there's nothing to get really excited about that. But that was the biggest action aside some of the drills, which were really interesting in itself too.
Yeah. And then the other thing that was maybe a little bit more on the exciting side was them working kind of substitutions, getting on and off the field, what their packages and sub packages look like that kind of work. And so you can kind of see a little bit of the energy around that, as well as the communication around all that. But we didn't get to see much more than those 16 total passes, John, and 7-on-7s, four sets of 4, 2 each for the quarterbacks.
Yeah, and Charlie Smith booting the bejesus out of the ball. So that was another thing. But,
I've never seen a dude kick an extra point so hard. That was
our
crazy.
Guy. That's our guy, Charlie Smith. Well, look, I think that the fact that we're talking about one quarterback going 8 of 8 and the other quarterback going 7-on-7 in the first open OTA of the offseason is a direct sign of where we are. And everybody's all excited and saying this is great. But for me, I'm like how quickly things change over time when we have an established quarterback, at least, not necessarily a quarterback competition, but we have such young guys that have the opportunity to, kind of take that job and make it their own, that we're talking about 7-on-7 completions, right? Like that's pretty incredible. But I'm not gonna, make it all negative. I do think it's a sign that these guys are getting coached up. You don't just show up, get in the huddle, call a play, and start making completions, right? Like you got to know what you're doing. You have to be able to communicate with the guys around you, and then you got to go execute. So if Kellen Moore is going to do anything, if the coaches in that coaching staff are going to do anything, it's going to make sure that these guys have the answers to the test before they step onto the field. And that's something that you hope that all, teams have, but especially our team. And it felt at times in the last couple of years that the guys trotting out there weren't totally prepared to be able to go and do their jobs the way that they need to do their jobs. So, that is the initial reaction for me without actually having been there and seen any of the reps myself. But it is a good sign, right? Yeah. I'm not going to celebrate a guy going 8 for 8 in OTAs and 7-on-7. You know why? Because that's what he's supposed to do. Right. That's what it's supposed to do. Those drills are set up. Yeah. Those drills are set up for the offense to be successful. Now, the guys on the other side of the ball get paid too, right? So if the defenders are able to make a good play, then so be it. But I'm not going to be talking about Super Bowl Saints now because we had our quarterbacks go a combined
too early.
14 or 15 of 16 in one OTA practice. So, what do they do beyond that? What are they going to do to build onto that? Now, if we start seeing these guys consistently doing that, every single day throughout OTAs, but how often are we going to be able to be out there to see these guys do that? So I'm not quite as excited about it. I think it's a good sign, but not as much about the numbers of completions or the percentage of completions, but the fact that the guys are going out and executing the plays that are called.
Yeah. And Kellen Moore will tell you over and over again, it's about the mental side. It's about the operation. Yeah. You get in and out of the huddle cleanly. When you get out of the huddle and you get to the line of scrimmage, does everybody know what they're doing? Have you communicated clearly? Are you making the right, I don't know how many checks and things like that you're really running at the line of scrimmage in these simulated situations when there's no defense on the other side of you, or it's just a 7-on-7, but are you commanding things enough to make sure that just everybody goes to the line of scrimmage and knows what it is that they're doing? Do you know what it is that they're doing? That's where I felt like we saw a cleanliness in the quarterback operation that I think is maybe even more important than the 8 of 8 or 7 or 6 of 8, any of that. It was just, can you operate the offense? And it felt like in this early moment where you're laying things down that are foundational, not maybe the most overly complicated pieces. I talked to one coach who told me we give them an entire 7-course meal in the film room and in the classroom environment. But then when we get out on the field, all they're getting right now is the appetizer. So there's still so much more for these players to get. But in the early goings, I would say that in terms of laying the building blocks, there's a cleanliness that was good to see for young quarterbacks.
And look, if they go, don't do as well, Thursday, nobody should start. I know there's going to be the locals that just be like, oh, is Rattler really going to be the starter, or Shough's going to look bad? Y'all just stop it. Michael Jordan, stop it. You know what I mean? That until you get to training camp, that's when actual things are going to matter. It's good. You want to build off of stuff, right, and look good. But to Lance's point, again, this is all scripted and a lot of OTAs. Even the first several days of training camp, the offense is going to look better than the defense. I mean, it's going to be that type of stuff. So it's just. We said it last week.
But there will also be days where the defense dominates the offense.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 100%. It happened when I was playing, when Drew Brees was there. It happens. So it's why did it happen this day? What were we doing wrong? What were they doing that was so great that we couldn't, make a completion? We didn't have any completions down the field. What happened? It doesn't mean that those guys aren't going to be good. It doesn't mean the offense is going to stink. And conversely, it doesn't mean that our defense is terrible because they couldn't stop the quarterbacks in 7-on-7 in one day of OTAs, right? We should not jump the gun in any given scenario based off of, the little bit of football that we've seen so far that really isn't even football yet, right? It's still controlled and not full team reps with pads and blitzes and all those things. So still very, very premature.
Yeah, but I feel like this is an overall, I think, a positive look from the first couple of days. I mean, it's better than them going 0 of 8. Because I've been to my fair share of LSU training camps, and I've seen days where they struggled to complete a pass in 7-on-7s. So it's better than not completing passes, I'll say. I think that's the best way to go with it right now.
And look, Dylan, I'll say this too. I think we feel this every year, but this is definitely a different energy around the building than it has been in previous years. Like, and I mean that, like, of course, everybody's excited because you're back in the building, but a different energy, a different vibe that I just don't think we've seen in quite some time out there. You know what I mean? And so, inside the locker room, and again, whether it's real or not, we'll find out soon enough. But I think that's also another thing is that, I think there's general excitement with the direction of where things are going, a new program, new coaching staff, all those types of things. And I think there's some rejuvenation for some of these players. I think there's some determination and some chips on their shoulders. And so I hope to see more of that come out as we go along this process.
Mm-hmm. Well, what is real, the decision that needs to be made on the offensive line. And coming up next, we're going to be talking about the first look that we got at that here at OTAs. Have you ever checked your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Did you know I'm paying $30 for Disney Plus and ESPN and Hulu and all of this stuff? I didn't know that. I just clicked a button one day and it turns out I'm paying $30. I found that out the other day, so pretty annoyed about that. But
that one got me too.
I should have gotten Monarch Money, because Monarch Money comes in, it's your personal CFO. It gives you full visibility and control over your finances. It's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you just stop managing your money and you start building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Jump right into the offensive line conversation. We were wondering what they were going to look like. We know that there's a decision to be made. They have 3 tackles, so someone's going to have to move inside. And it turns out it was Trevor Penning. So let's start with John. What did you make of the first? I mean, again, it was 7-on-7, not real football, but you got to see some of the offensive line look in the drills and stuff. What do you think so far?
Yeah, look, I'd start off by this is the drills, first of all, because I actually like to pay attention to drills to see what's different. And you saw that with the offensive line, saw that with the tight end room, like different ones. And so one of the things Brendan Nugent did is you could see this in the Saints, like the recap and stuff, but they were having a knee on the medicine balls, and they were practicing their get off on the medicine balls, right? And so that's a different wrinkle that I haven't seen from the offensive line, which I thought was really interesting to see. And they also ran this like gauntlet where, you got 5 offensive linemen with the pads, and everybody's got to go and hit each other. I mean, it seems like fundamental stuff, but again, I'm a nerd and I haven't seen that in years, or haven't seen that in a long time. And so that makes me excited that they're teaching things a little bit differently. But I say all that to say that, Trevor Penning moving inside was a conversation that Kellen Moore said they had before the draft, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't think they were going to do it. I didn't think that Trevor Penning could be somebody on the inside, but they're trying to do it. Now, whether that's fitting a square peg in a round hole, I don't know. But again, he's embracing it. He's going to go there and see. And look, Trevor Penning can be good in the run game. He can be excellent in the run game. I just don't know what is his feet going to be like making a shift to guard and the interior. Kelvin Banks being on the left tackle side already as a rookie, I think it's a good credit to him, just like what we saw with Taliesin Fuanga and such. And so, look, it's going to be on Penning to hang on to this job, right? Dylan Radins was the second guy at left guard. He's going to be somebody that can push him, I feel like, but it's Trevor Penning's job to lose if they can stay healthy. If that starting 5 can stay healthy, 85% of the snaps or more, I feel really good about the offensive line. But look, I got to be honest, I was a little bit surprised at Trevor Penning being that left guard. Not that he didn't have the talent, but I just didn't really see it. And everything that we were told in the offseason, they didn't really have plans to move him on the inside. They wanted to keep him at tackle, but things changed, obviously.
I had gotten consistent no's about the idea of moving Trevor Penning inside until like Monday before training camp. And then all of a sudden the back channel communication turned into, yeah, we'll see. And it was like, oh, okay. Okay. I feel you. And so it feels like even though they've been having that conversation since before the NFL draft, John, it feels like maybe it was a later decision that actually finally led them to the point of doing it. I wonder what it is that changed their mind. But I think it's a win for them nonetheless, especially if it works out. Obviously, like if it works out has to be the caveat there.
I think the decision to change was Brendan Nugent and TJ Paganetti. I think those are the ones that I feel like were the say. Nugent probably came in there and said, I think we can make this guy work at guard, and Paganetti too, which look, we talked to Jack Stoll in the locker room, tight end, who's kind of running a lot with the first team. He's like, this dude's underrated. He's like a steal. I feel like he's been hidden in the shadows, like Batman kind of type stuff. And now he's going to be able to show his best stuff. So look, I'm excited about that, but I think that's probably where some of that conversation came in.
Yeah.
Well, Ross, it reminded me while we're here talking about the offensive line and, you know, the run game a little bit, can you give us a quick overview of your recent talk with Pagnetti? You got the chance to sit down with him.
Yeah, he was awesome, man. And he's just like one of those dudes. Like we talked last week about how during OTAs, one of the things we wanted to see was like coaching staff bringing the fire, kind of setting the tone and everything like that. I think that I look at TJ Paganetti as having the same level of excitement on the coaching staff that Bub Means has about pretty much doing anything. But like these guys are both just like big, shiny personalities that are just so excited, love what it is that they do. Paganetti's loving the city of New Orleans. He had only ever been like Oregon, Philly, and that was his entire coaching career. And then coming down here to New Orleans was really like his first big move outside of that. And one of the big things that he talked about with me when I asked him, like, what are the goals of the run game, which is like a basic question, but, you know, you set him up with a basic question, give him the opportunity to see how nuanced he wants to be.
We should say, I don't know if we've mentioned he's the new run game coordinator. I don't know if we've mentioned that.
Which is a new position to this New Orleans Saints coaching staff in terms of the way that it's been recently structured. And so it's a little bit of a kind of new-ish approach, I'll say. It's just based on the recent coaching staffs. And so with him being kind of looking over the run game, helping to install the run game, helping to create the run game, I asked him kind of like, what's the goal of your approach? And he mentioned that the biggest goals here are to set up gaps and then create home run opportunities for their running backs. Those are the two things that they want to do, which again feels like common sense, but that was kind of the running theme throughout all of this, is that all of a sudden it feels like common sense, which is good. We're not having conversations about how things might be too complex or need to be dialed back and stuff like that, like we were having in previous, with the previous regime. And so one of the things that I asked him outside of that was, how do you ensure, like, what goes into creating a successful home run play? And he said, well, we don't put players in positions that suck. Like, we just don't put them in bad positions. And again, it feels like common sense, but that's exactly what it feels like it should be at this point. And so I really, really like the direction that he's kind of taking things. He's super transparent with the players. And Lance, maybe you can speak to this about whether or not this is actually unique. I don't know, but he just wants to make sure that like hey, this is what your responsibility is on this play comes with the why, and that everything's completely explained. And I don't know if maybe sometimes that's taken for granted or if that's just kind of what everybody does. But it seems like that's a big focus of his, is making sure that everybody understands, like, not only, hey, here's your role, but here's why your role is important. Because if you take out this, if you take this 2-eye out of the play, then all of a sudden this is a big time home run and we get the one-on-one with the linebacker for the running back. And if he wins that, then all of a sudden he's off to the races, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the coaching style that he's trying to bring to the situation.
Yeah, Lance cracked a couple of fools when he was blocking.
Yeah, right.
Got to be able to do both, right?
That's right.
You can't just be the pass catcher. You got to be able to, stick your nose in there on the run game as well. And look, I feel like I have maybe not confirmed this, but I feel like I understand the reason why Trevor Penning is at guard now, and maybe they didn't talk about it as much. The guy was a first-round pick. So they're going to give him every single opportunity to be a starter, whether that's at the position that they drafted him to play or any of the other 4 positions on the offensive line. I'm not surprised by it at all, right? Like the last thing that you want to have is another potential first-round bust. And I wouldn't even call him necessarily a first-round bust, because he had an okay year last year. Not good enough that they didn't need to draft another tackle. But worst case scenario, you put him in there. He's a good enough player to be a starter to like you guys talked about, be dominant in the run game. But the deficiencies that he showed at times with his footwork on the edge as a tackle aren't the same when you're inside kind of protected playing guard, right? He's got one of the best centers in the National Football League in Eric McCoy that's going to be next to him on every single play. So it's not the same scenario. So I think that, you know, putting him inside will give him probably the best opportunity to continue to play, you know, be a starter on this offense. I think the two tackles, I think they're locked in. They wouldn't have drafted Kelvin Banks where they drafted him if he wasn't going to be a starter on one side or the other. And I think putting Tally back to the right side where I'm not going to say he's more comfortable because I haven't talked to him, but where he's played most of his career on that right side, I think it makes total sense. Now, if Trevor Penning doesn't work out as a guard, then so be it. Then they slide Dylan Radins or one of the other guys in there, and Trevor Penning becomes your swing guy, right? Mm-hmm. Not just a swing tackle. Hey, we tried him in there. He wasn't the best, but now he knows he's got time on task. He's got a bunch of reps in the offseason playing guard, so he can be a guy that can not only be an extra tackle or guard or big tight end, right? Like he becomes even more valuable to your offense, you know, a guy being able to play all those different positions in the case of somebody going down. And if history repeats itself, like it generally does in football with injuries, somebody's going to go down. So I would imagine he's going to play at some point anyway. So I think it's good that they're getting him those reps inside now, because they know that he can play right tackle. And then obviously he has played left tackle as well. So these are big time learning opportunity reps for him and something to build from for him. You know, I think it's smart of them to do that rather than just kind of putting him to the wayside. Hey, we signed this guy in free agency. Let's elevate him to be our starter. And Trevor, you just kind of get in where you fit in, play with the twos, and then in big packages at some point down the road, maybe we'll put you in at tight end. Like, I think this is a smart decision by them, and not just to try to save face for the organization because he's a first round pick, but because you invested heavily in him. So you need to see if he could turn out to be a really good and potentially dominating force for you up front inside as opposed to outside.
And it gives you an opportunity. Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, it does put confidence in Trevor Penning too, to say you're not going to just slide him on the second team. So that's good. Correct. Also, shout out to Taliesin Fawanga for saying pineapple does belong on pizza. Because
shout out. Yeah.
I'm just saying,
out here.
Y'all can fight later in the chat.
We out here.
We'll not
drop in the chat right now. Pineapple pizza, yay or nay?
Yay all day. I think the thing that's really great for them too is the future investment that they might have to make in Trevor Penning as well, right? They didn't take the 5th-year option. I think I brought this up on the show before, but they didn't take the 5th-year option, which means they didn't lock themselves into a first-round tackle 5th-year option. Even though he didn't get any of the postseason awards and stuff like that would have like knocked his contract up, it was still $16.7 million, $16.8 million. It's a lot of money to invest in a guy that you weren't super sure about, to the point where you still went and drafted a tackle in the top 10. And now you have this opportunity to really go back to kind of the drawing table there in terms of, or the negotiation table there in terms of, instead of paying a first round tackle 5th-year option that's collectively bargained off of an average that's based on what else is happening in the market at that position, you're going to the table with a guard with 1 year of experience. That's a very different negotiation situation for a team. And so it just kind of opens up either a guard or a swing offensive lineman with a year of experience at guard. That gives you a lot of, I guess I'll say, freedom in the negotiation process to really land on something that works for both sides, as opposed to being locked into something that neither side gets an opportunity to negotiate by the time that you wrap around to that. So I think that's good. And I think that getting Trevor Penning in between Eric McCoy and Kelvin Banks Jr., who Kelvin Banks Jr. might be, a rookie, but that he's got a lot of, he's very veteran-like in terms of the way that he carries himself, the way that he I mean, like the media stuff, but I mean, even on the field, like you just look at the look on his face, he looks like a hardened veteran. Like it looks like he's been doing it for 10 years and everything like that. Not that face. It's a different face than that. That's for sure. Dylan's background is still Kelvin Banks Jr. on his phone. That's so funny. And he's got this picture of him smiling, but like you see him on the field and he's ready to go to battle. He's ready to go to war. And like, I imagine that's a pretty comfortable place to be for Trevor Penning in terms of that confidence building opportunity there for him at guard.
Yeah, well, we've had fun talking about the quarterbacks and the offensive line, but coming up next, we're going to give some shout-outs to some players who also made an impact in the first few days of OTAs. It's not all just passing the ball and getting protecting the guy passing the ball. Who else stood out from OTAs? And I'm going to give a shout out to a guy that we all love. Everyone knows and love. I wasn't there, but it felt so good to know that we already got a shuck it Rashid Shaheed's down there somewhere. Because whenever Rashid Shaheed is working and playing well and being that deep threat and just making an impact on the field, something feels different about the Saints offense. He's been such a good find. He's like easily my favorite player to watch on the field. So it's good to see him back healthy and already making an impact, even if it's just in OTAs, and already building that trust with some quarterbacks. So that's the first guy I wanted to give a shout out to. Ross, anyone else that maybe stood out?
Yeah, I'll further the Rashid Shaheed thing because I've said on Locked On Saints constantly, like, respect Rashid Shaheed's gangsta. And I think we got an opportunity to really see that again when it came to this OTA practice. Just he doesn't look like he's lost a step at all. Remember, he's coming off of a meniscus surgery. It wasn't even a given that he was going to be on the field, period. Like it's one thing to see him involved in the offseason workout videos and stuff like that, but it was a different expectation in terms of, or a different possibility, I guess I'll say, different criteria he had to meet in order to be ready to be out there to actually participate in OTAs. And he was out there cutting, running, and all of this stuff, fast as ever, still the fastest dude on the football field is what he looks like constantly. And so it was really cool to see that. That was awesome. And yeah, that like pump and go on the slant and go or the sluggo route was an awesome big moment. That's what I alluded to earlier is Tyler Shough had the biggest play of the day. It was that completion down that right sideline to Rashid Shaheed. I think the other player that really stood out to me was Alontae Taylor. We've talked a lot about him on the show, moved around a lot. Say again.
I said you took one player. But that's good. I'm giving Alontae some love.
Yeah, he deserves it too. Like I won't go too far into details so that John can go into more, but like this is, I want to leave you some meat on the bone because I think that like Alontae in this new role, there's a lot of exciting things that he might be able to do. And we got some early glimpses in terms of what that could potentially look like, him being able to move around and things like that. So it's clear that the excitement that he felt when Brandon Staley was hired is coming through on the field for him. And so that was really cool to watch.
Yeah. I just add to that is his vocal ability on the field.
Yeah.
Like he was, I mean, he's just more of a leader type role. And look, this is something he started last training camp. I mean, that was one of the first things I noticed. Like he was working with some of the rookies in more of a teaching role. So like Alontae quietly becoming more of a leader and more vocal and, seeing him kind of dap up a little bit with Brandon Staley, like that type of stuff, like building that type of relationship matters. And Alontae, all he's done is crave a role where he can thrive. And that's like literally was his begging is saying, use me how I need to be used. And so like it was good. And of course, in OTAs, these sessions are really more about the offense, right? But noticing Alontae, that's a good call, Ross, because I think he definitely was somebody that just stood out without really having to do much of anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lance, we weren't there. Is there anyone else that stood out from like reporting that you wanted to ask more, hear more about?
I was actually gonna touch on both of those guys. I mean, I was not there to see it, but with Alontae,
I got more.
A thought came into my mind that there is no required number of years of service, right, to become a leader, right? Like the only prerequisite to becoming a leader is being able to have time on task, right? Like he's a guy that's played a lot of football. While he's still young in his years in the National Football League, he's played a lot, right? He's played inside, he's played outside, he's played special teams. He's a guy that's been around right now, and he's been on multiple defenses now, and he's got a way or a style of play and personality that would lend to becoming a very good vocal type leader, right? So that really doesn't make me confused, right? That he's out there becoming one of those guys that could potentially be a leader on that defense. Like he possesses all of the necessary characteristics and traits of good leaders. And to Rashid Shaheed, I mean, just to see him back healthy again, right? Like, I mean, like the somebody who missed time last year and a guy that's missed time in multiple years, like good to see guys back healthy, competing, and you know, again, shout out to the whole entire coaching staff, because OTAs and offseason is probably the most important time for coaching, for skill development, and really just continuing to improve upon the talent level that you have, and making sure that guys really understand exactly what it is that you're trying to do on both sides of the ball, and really all three phases of football, right? Like training camp, it becomes more intense. The pads come on. It's more geared toward now we got to get ready for the season. There's still skill development going on then, but it's not quite as like, they don't have as much time to be getting into, okay, well, this guy has this kind of deficiency, or this position group needs to work on these couple of things. OTAs and off-season workouts is the premier time for that stuff to take place. So, and then obviously that's going on all around the National Football League. I'm not just saying that Kellen and this staff is the only staff that's doing that, but it is good to see the new coaches come in with the new energy. The players seem to be taking to that energy. And you know, the positivity around the building, like you guys mentioned, I mean, I think that's paramount, right? Like that's a part of the process of kind of getting the old out and bringing on the new. You know, call it rebuild, call it retool, call it whatever you want, but you know, the sun has finally set on, and I've talked about it for a long time, and I don't even know if I've talked about it on this show, but I have felt like this organization has not been able to let go of 2009, right? Like, now I'm not saying you need to forget it, you know, but to like stand up and get crunk in the dome still 15, 16 years later is just kind of, it's cool if you play it every now and again for nostalgia purposes.
For sure.
But literally, like, we have to, okay, great. We won a Super Bowl and it was great, but like, what have we done lately? Like, we haven't won another one. That should be the goal. The goal should not be to live off of that one Super Bowl victory forever, right? Like, the times have changed, and we need to make sure that the goal remains the same, and that's to win another Super Bowl. It's not like, oh, to compete, but we have that one, and Atlanta has none, which I still appreciate that, but we just like, it's really like the time needs to kind of change and move forward, and like it needs to have a new feel, because that old regime is gone. Those players aren't coming back. There's no players on that roster from the 2009 Super Bowl team. No coaches. Like, it is time to start anew with this group, and I'm happy and excited to see that.
Yeah, there's multiple ways to win a Super Bowl. You don't have to be married to the way that you did it before, right? Like,
Correct.
Once everything moved on, once Sean moved on, once Drew retired, all that kind of stuff, once those players cycled, like you mentioned, there's no need to try to hold on to what worked before when there's opportunities to change to what's working now. And I think that might be a little bit of what Kellen Moore and Brandon Staley represent here.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on, we talked about last week about the coaches, and you've touched on it a little bit with Bagnetti, but were there any other coaches that stood out in their, you know, aggression or intensity early on?
Bo Davis. Bo Davis. I mean, he's going to stick out no matter what, because like he's a big dude who looks ready to be out on the football field. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you could throw him out there just as quickly as you could throw Bink or any of these other guys out there. But like commanding presence, which is awesome. Him and Brandon Staley were kind of right in front of us as they were working like substitutions from base packages into sub packages and all these other things. And you could just the way that he was coaching the guys, the way he was celebrating these guys, the way he was quickly noting them on the sideline, the way that he was getting players in and out. Like everybody's kind of, there's a coach that's in charge of each of their own position groups. You know what I mean? And so just this opportunity to kind of watch these guys work so closely, because we were in the indoor facility. And so in the indoor facility, you're right there. Like we're at risk of being run over. We're constantly like moving back from the sidelines and all this other stuff. Like, you're right there. And so getting the opportunity to see him and Brandon Staley and Staley's kind of intensity, which is one of the things I was like really banking on seeing throughout. I think those two guys were ones that stood out. They were also right in front of us, so it made it easy for that. But I thought that they kind of did their own thing, which was dope.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun to hear about the early days of this era of Kellen Moore, and it's good to see that there's already a different feeling in the building.
Yeah, the vibes are real different. The vibes are real different. I talked to one player who told me simply, we're finally, like, basically along the lines of something like we're finally taking a step in the right direction and everything. Like there's players in that locker room that have been there for a previous regime into this regime and feel a lot of relief going into the way that everything's starting. Now, we got to see what happens when games are played and when games are lost and how that ends up impacting the field and everything like that. Like, it's easy to be excited right now and everything, but that's a good thing. They should be, right? If you're going into this part of the process and you're negative, you ain't going nowhere. And so like, it's still a good thing to see, but you can already tell like players are very excited with where things are going. They're less worried about what's not here anymore and more worried about the potential of what could be on the way. And I think that's exactly where they should be right now.
Yeah, as long as Kellen Moore hasn't said the phrase "keep doing what you're doing," I think we're off to a good start.
None of that.
None of that. Yeah. John, have you had anyone else that you think has stood out so far?
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't go, because I was gonna say, can I only just do one, or can I do multiple people?
Do whatever you feel like, John. Do whatever you feel like.
Well, I touched on Charlie Smith, and so I know that's not. Everybody's not really going to get excited about that, but he made all 5 of his kicks. He looked comfortable.
In this podcast, we will.
I mean, on this podcast, right? The special teams love, all that stuff. And, I think that was one of them. Just, again, they're going to do a rotation is what they were telling me. So Groupie's going to kick similar to like last year. Groupie's going to kick one, time, and then Smith. So I'd expect to probably see Groupie this next time. But again, Smith is very intriguing. And so I thought he did extremely well. On the offensive side, I thought Kendre Miller looked pretty good in his time that was there. He looks like he's, determined, focus and all that. But also I have to point out that Marcus Yarns is getting some first team love, specifically in like blitz pickups, right? So undrafted running back out of Delaware. Really interesting to see him as a part of that first team offense. Of course, there's no AK in there, and we're not going to make too much. They're probably just kind of filling out what these guys can do and such. But I thought that was really interesting. And then look, Cedric Wilson Jr., he looked really comfortable in his role, man. I just saying a frequent target. I think he's somebody that can shine in this Kellen Moore offense, and he's done it before, right? And so we've talked about what does that fourth receiver look like. Cooksey looked good too. I think he came in looking comfortable as well. But and then on the defensive side, Nephi still getting a little bit of love, with Pete Warner on that. I think he looks good. I think we've talked about the linebacker depth and seeing kind of a little bit concerned a little bit there, but Nephi getting kind of that starting nod for now and sevens. And of course, when Jamario comes back, it'll be him and Pete. But look, there's a lot of people that I think that stood out for one reason or another. And look, of course, you're going to look at all this stuff and say, well, none of it matters some, but it does matter. And, it's a good confidence builder. And going into the next week, I like seeing Vernon Broughton being part of that rotation too. I think him he's big. He's a mammoth sized guy, really kind of, and they used him all over the different ones, right? Like, of course, we got kind of hung up on who's going to be the starting 3 defensive linemen. Colin was kind of more that middle guy for starters. There was no Devon Godchaw, right? But as Colin, and then Brzee was on one side and Broughton was on the other side, then they flipped and rotate. But also, Ross, a lot of two-man fronts. That was something that I saw a lot of. And that's something that I've wrote about and I've talked about, but Texas ran a lot of two-man fronts when they go to this nickel and to do all these other things. And so I thought that was really interesting as well.
Yeah, it's going to be, I can't wait to see what this is going to look like, because it is going to be a multi-front defense. It is going to be a multi-front defense, right? Like most defense, when we talk about like, oh, it's a 3-4, it's a 4-3, at best, you're talking about most of the time. You know what I mean? And heavy air quotes on most of the time. And so really what you're looking at is, multi-front. Sometimes it's even, sometimes it's odd, but the two-man down lineman front was one that I was not expecting, to where you had the two down linemen with their hands in the dirt, two stand-up guys, still two linebackers, but then you had the space for the extra DB. And so it was a really kind of interesting way to blend the two of what you would see from a four-man, which would be two DTs and two edge rushers, generally speaking, edge defenders, let's say. But then to do it in such a way that it still utilizes those stand-up edge rushers on either side, as opposed to one kind of edge rusher while the other ones could drop back into coverage and things like that. I did enjoy seeing Carl Granderson drop back into coverage at one point.
Cam dropped back in coverage too.
Cam too, yeah.
And
so and when I say drop back, when we say drop back into coverage, to be clear, we mean like in the flats, like, those types of situations where we've seen Cam his entire career take away those, those check downs to running backs, because he just gets his body in the passing lane. You know what I mean? It's not about covering a guy and following them downfield. It's, can you disrupt the quarterback? And I think they're going to come up with a lot of different ways to do that. I'm excited to see this Staley scheme come to life.
And filling in the gaps with linebackers too. I mean, that was the thing, is so not knowing what you're going to get. I mean, seeing that early on in the process is kind of a little bit interesting.
Yeah, you're right. Like, to see disguise like that this early shows you just how fundamental it's going to be to what this defense wants to do.
Yep.
Well, we've talked a lot about what we have seen, and coming up next, we're talking about what we want to see, because OTAs aren't done. That was just the first couple of days. Closing us out today, we're going to talk about what we want to see for the next couple of days of OTAs, and maybe some stuff that they didn't get to, or we don't want to not even change, really, just something that we want to see more of in the future. John, let's go with you.
Football. No, I'm just kidding.
More football. More football.
No, yeah. I mean, and everybody's got to remember that OTAs are strictly voluntary. So guys that weren't there, it was good seeing Foster Moreau around there, Quincy Riley, but Foster and Taysom Hill aren't going to be a part of the OTAs. Maybe training camp. I think that's still a stretch for Taysom Hill. But look, I just want to see really what the quarterbacks build on. Like, what do they look like? We didn't see any type of Hunter Decker reps. And we know Jake Haener, even though he was around, like, he's not going to be ready until training camp. And so this is a big opportunity for Deckers if he does get any type of work. But this seems to be kind of like the two-man focus right now. Kellen Moore said that they were doing rotation with the ones, but Spencer Rattler was the top guy all week. So I'm curious to see if that changes this next week too. But it's really about what kind of growth we see from the quarterbacks. And again, they make 8 throws a piece. We're going to get super excited and analyze the crap out of it. Probably, but does it really, really matter? No, probably not. But I think there's some different areas. Like, if I want to see Shough, expand where he takes some of his targets instead of more of the short game, right? I want to see him do some intermediate stuff. I like seeing him ad-libbing and throwing on the run. So I think those types of things matter, but I want to see more football. That's really what I say.
Fair.
Lance, anything that stands out to you?
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, I just think it's the continued skill development for sure is important. I think the continuing to create a culture of competition, and I'm not talking specific, only to the quarterback job, right? I'm talking team wise, right? Like, making everything competitive is going to bring out the best in everybody, I would imagine, and your team will be better as a result of that. If we're talking player specific, more Danny Stutzman. I need to see my man on the field. I need to hear about him.
Yeah.
I need to hear about him making plays, not just getting reps with the first team, right? Like all right. I talked about you a lot since the draft, and I need you to go ahead and make me right. That's what's important to me.
Personal. Personal.
Yeah.
Clap for me.
but honestly, like I do think that it's even though I'm not there, like I can feel a different energy toward the direction of where this organization is going, and finally putting to bed what was and starting anew with a new staff and a new team, right? Like this is not the same team as last year. There are a lot of the same players, but the makeup will look a lot differently come week 1 this season than it did all of last season. So, I want to see our guys continue to improve. I want to see the coaches continue to put their initial imprint on this team. And I want to see our guys who are injured get back healthy, and our guys who are healthy stay healthy. That's important to me.
Yeah. Ross, anything that stands out to you?
I'm glad that Lance said that, because the thing that I wrote down was Riley and Holker were two names that I wrote down. So Quincy Riley, of course, had the offseason procedure after he was drafted. He's in the midst of recovering from that. It's minor. It's not going to be a big deal, but it's kept him from participating so far. He's been on the field. He's been around the team. He sticks around the position group, all that kind of stuff, everything, but he hasn't been able to participate so far. Same thing for second-year tight end Dallin Holker, who was considered the 8th round draft pick last year of the Saints undrafted free agency class. They were super excited about him. And so
but
then they never really got him out there. So he never really got any opportunities. And but like now you're dealing with, there's no Foster Morrow, there's no Taysom Hill that's going to be, a part of anything soon. And so if Dallin Holker gets out there, all of a sudden he's got opportunity, right? Because it's kind of him and then kind of the rest of that group behind Juwan Johnson are going to get, kind of swapped around, everything like that. I'm excited to see more Jake Stoll. I think he is a more integral signing to this system than people realize publicly. And so I think that like him coming in and having had experience with these guys. So the tight end position, I think, is something that I want to see a little bit more of. And then just the injury progression, like Lance said, you get some of these players that are dealing with injury back while you're waiting for some of the other kind of longer term injuries to get better. So those are going to be a couple of things that I'm looking forward to. And I'm just looking forward to seeing too, like, what's the next, you're scaffolding when you're doing this, right? You're starting off kind of in this fundamental place in terms of like, here are the things that are core to what it is that we're doing, typically speaking. That's my understanding of what the goals are in this situation. And so, with the coach that I talked to that said, hey, we're just giving them the appetizer right now, then what's those next 7 courses look like? You know what I mean? As it comes to the table. And so I'm just curious to see kind of like what the next layer on top of everything is as they expand into the larger part of the installation at this point, or familiarization or acclimation to what it is that this new system is doing. As Lance highlighted earlier, how important this moment is for coaches and establishment and everything like that. And I imagine it's even more important when you're bringing something brand new to the entire roster, right? Like everybody's kind of in the same place here. So how do you build? And so that's what I'm curious to see what we see new next, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you touched on that. I'm really excited to see more of this tight end room. I know it's not at all near healthy, but that's kind of what makes me excited to see what they do with it and how they get creative and what they do, because that has just been such a position that they have needed more impact in for a long time. It would have been nice to get Tyler Warren out there for Lance, but they didn't go that route. They didn't go that route. So I want to see what they do with what they have. To see what changes are made on that front. So that's the one thing that I've been really excited to see. And now, I mean, y'all mentioned 2-man fronts. So I'm excited to see what all they do with this defense, because that's exciting. Like, and how much impact the Texas guys have, because that was a fun defense to watch, fun defensive line group to watch. So I'm excited to see what Brandon Staley does, because it seems like we're about to get something fun on the defensive side of the ball. I know they've been, since that was the calling card for a while, but it has been rough to watch for a while. So I think they were desperately in need of this kind of big overhaul. So that's another thing I'm going to be watching to see who stands out and what roles they find for players over the next couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. I guess I should highlight the run game too. Like as more of the run game gets installed and everything like that, the conversation that I had with TJ Pacadetti was it just kind of opened my eyes to how different these run schemes are around the NFL. Like they're not doing the wide zone thing, but that changes everything from not just what we think of, which is like the point of attack in the run game, but it changes angles and everything. It changes everybody's job when you do that. It's not just about the direction that the running back is going or where the running back is trying to go. It changes everything. And so seeing the evolution of that along with the evolution of the defense, I think is good and can be exciting. I think that it's part of what it is that you're looking forward to as a whole over the course of the entire off season, because so much is different. So much is changing from a scheme perspective. And so I think that's another thing. And then I'll mention the offensive line rotation too. Like, is this really what the offensive line is going to look like the entirety of OTAs, or are they going to continue to rotate these guys and see, And so that's the other part that becomes really intriguing, because they'll talk about how they're going to rotate all day, but do they really? That's what happened last year. They put Taliesin Wong out there at left tackle in what was it, rookie minicamp, John? And then they were like, yeah, we're going to try a bunch of different things. And then he never left that spot.
Yeah. Coaches lie, just so you know.
But that's also a good sign, right? Like,
right.
They put him there and he never left. Well, okay, well, we don't need to move him around and rotate and get a look at him anywhere else, because he is so good at that spot.
Yep. And so if you have a guy like Trevor Penning who gets his first look at left guard and then never moves from there, it's a pretty good sign, especially when you're opening up your run game a bit to run more between the tackles. I mean, last year the Saints ran outside the tackles 69.8%. Nice. And it was way, way too much. Like, it was just it was their entire identity. It was the most out of anybody in the NFL. They ran about more zone than anybody else in the NFL. Like, they did all this kind of stuff. And so now all of a sudden you get this kind of like balanced and diverse run scheme under Kellen Moore that's going to run between the tackles, outside the tackles, zone, man, gap. Like, you're just doing all this kind of stuff. You got to have a good, strong offensive line from center out in order to be able to execute all of that. And so if Trevor Penning ends up just staying there, that ends up being a great sign for them, because that's a dude I wouldn't mind running behind if I was a running back. I'll just say it that way.
Yeah. John, anything else stand out to you that you want to you wanted to see more from the segment that you got to watch?
Yeah, I mean, again, just seeing more the wide receiver connection, chemistry. Like, was Rattler look like with CO? I mean, we didn't even talk about Chris Olave, really, and still look good. I mean, he still looks like
still
CO.
Smiling,
great. I mean, he looks like he's in the best shape of his life. And so him and Brandon Cooks, I mean, the chemistry between Rattler and those big three are going to be really, really big. And Juwan Johnson, we hadn't talked about him. And so, like, I kind of alluded to some of the tight end drills. Like, they were doing a drill, him and Chase Hazlitt, where, somebody was holding Juwan's hands behind his back, and Foster's there with one of the little arm pads to try to like catch the ball. But like, he had to get release out of, like, you're being held and then make the catch. I mean, that's something I hadn't seen from the tight end room since I've covered the team. And so I know it seems like it's a silly fundamental drill, but like that's going to help Juwan, because, we need the tight ends to really elevate their game. But, I think Juwan looked comfortable out there as well. And so, look, I'm just interested to see how everything continues to go. Look, we're going to focus on everything, right? We're going to watch it. We're going to see it all and stuff. And so when come Thursday morning show, we'll probably talk more about it. Right. And so I think there's a lot to get into still with, where things are going to go for this Saints team.
You saw what else the tight ends were working with on Thursday, did you, John?
What's that?
The rugby balls are back, baby.
Oh yeah. Bringing those in. Yeah.
And this time they've made it to the tight end room.
Right.
Keith Williams had the wide receivers working with rugby balls last year, get them catching, hand spread, like working all this stuff, get them catching something bigger, so that when they get to the footballs, they're like, dang, this feels small and it feels manageable and everything like that. And so now we saw the tight ends doing that this past week, excuse me.
That's interesting. It's an interesting look. It's I love seeing the weird things that people do to warm up. I know that the 2023 LSU baseball team, before every game they threw footballs around.
Oh,
Like
interesting.
they practiced with footballs for like the throwing motion.
So did the Mighty Ducks in the movie. Said you be the quarterback. Anyways, sorry, I had to think about that. So they got ready.
And I don't know what it means. It's on me and something I have to get used to. But every time y'all say Brandon Cooks, I'm like, oh yeah, he's back. Like
you got to get used to that, man.
I know. I got to get used to it.
He was great in the locker room too, by the way. He was awesome.
But we have a long time to get used to Brandon Cooks being back. It's the off season and in training camps and OTAs. We're going to be seeing a lot more of them. And you're going to be seeing a lot more of us. So thank you for listening to Saint Squad. Check out me, Ross, John, and Lance on our socials for the latest. We'll be right back at this spot on Thursday to talk more about practice. We'll talk about practice?
Practice.